Hey everybody, it's been a while, but I'm glad we're back because today we have a very cool car to talk about. The Corvette Z06, seen here with the Z07 package and every doodad and option you could possibly get on it. There's a lot to talk about. This is a hell of a car, easily on par with the hypercars, the $1 million hypercars we started this whole thing with. Just in terms of tech. I mean, there's some really impressive stuff happening underneath the bodywork of this car. But before we start getting into the nitty gritty of it, I thought it'd be cool to show you guys Randy Pope's lap, his fastest lap in this thing at Road Atlanta. So through the magic of some editing, that's what you'll see next. Yeah, so this Randy guy's pretty fast. I put this picture up on Instagram earlier. I drove this car back in October at Road Atlanta. That was where the Chevy press event was, and that's when it was. And Randy happens to be a neighbor of Road Atlanta, so we invited him to come on down and drive the Z06 and get his impressions from it too. And boy, I'm glad we did, because that is a lot of car. Now, I took this picture earlier and put it on Instagram because we were actually not allowed to post any Z06 related stuff back when we were doing the event because of an embargo. So I led you guys all astray with the car we were actually driving. That's the C7R race car. That's the actual thing, and it's pretty beastly. They didn't turn it on. They didn't let us run it or anything. It was just there following the race it had just competed in at Road Atlanta. It was pretty cool to see, just post-race, how it looked with all the bugs and debris and all that on it. Interestingly, as I got, just talking to the engineers and stuff, this car, tires are a big deal in racing. And just forgive me this brief aside, but the tires on this particular car, because they wanted to roll it around in front of the journalists to wow us and stuff because it's a race car, the tires are actually rentals. They borrowed tires, I believe, from Michelin to just so they could have the car and roll it around in front of us. Not allowed to drive it, of course, and actually learned that this is how serious the tire game is in racing. That if you have a tire explode or whatever during racing, or if you've gotten a crash and a tire breaks apart, tire engineers, from their respective companies, will actually come to the race and pick up those shreds, those parts and pieces of tires, in order to make sure that other companies aren't stealing them and getting trade secrets or something, or to go back and do analysis on what happened and what the damage is. They take tires fairly seriously. Of course, if the car's not running, you can use its wing as a cup holder, as I demonstrated here. And as you can see by the water on this car, it did rain the morning we were there, which is kind of a bummer. But anyway, back to the Z06. So just to tell you guys our experience with it, like I mentioned, the team was out in Atlanta for 2 days. We spent the first day at the racetrack with the car, second day on the road with the car. At the racetrack, we were able to sample the Corvette Z51 with the 8-speed auto, and some other minor changes they've made to that car this year. They've also updated the manual. Drove the Z06 in a couple different trims, and there are, widely changing trims that you can get on this thing. It's pretty impressive when we get down into it. The second day we took a Z06 on the road to shoot photos for the magazine, for the story, and all that stuff. And then a couple weeks later, Chevy trailered a car out to us in LA so we could test it at our test track. Couldn't drive it on the street because of Chevrolet's internal rules, but at least we were able to test it. That's where we were able to get awesome numbers for it. So without further ado, let's get into what makes the Z06 tick. There is, of course, the horsepower and torque. 650 horsepower, 650 pound-feet. It's a lot of power. It's a lot of power. Now, on this graph, this isn't... I don't like the way they did this graph because these axes aren't equal. So, the max thing here is 700 horsepower. The max thing here is 1,400 pound-feet of torque. And ideally, you'd have these equal. Maybe they do it just to emphasize, how much this shoots up. It's kind of a way to make a graph look a specific way instead of just saying what it actually is. I wish these were on the same axes. But whatever. The main point is that the Z06 makes a ton of power, and it makes a ton of power everywhere. Just off idle, 1,000 RPM, you're above 400 pound-feet of torque. 1,000 RPM, you're at 400 pound-feet of torque. Most street cars don't make that at redline, and this thing's doing that just off idle. And, you're looking at 20, you're above 600 pound-feet of torque from, let's say 2,800 RPM to 5,000 RPM. That's serious power right there. It's kind of crazy to think about. And then horsepower is just ridiculous on this thing. This is a very capable engine, this LT4, which is the internal code name for it. It's a 6.2 liter V8 with, of course, a supercharger on top of it. Now, the interesting thing that when we were at the launch, Taj Jukter was there, and I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. He's the Corvette chief engineer, really good guy, straight shooter, and as you would imagine, really knows his stuff, which is cool. What was kind of surprising is he explained that when they started developing the Z06, they originally didn't aim to beat the ZR1. What they did is they wanted to make it like the last Z06, have a high revving, naturally aspirated engine, big displacement, and make it, sort of that driver's track limit performance car with that kind of powertrain in mind. But so the engine that they developed, this big displacement, high revving engine, couldn't match their emissions targets. They wanted to basically do a new LS7, and they couldn't do it because of emissions. So they had to restart with the supercharger, and then that's when they realized, while developing the engine, that they could beat the ZR1, not just in terms of horsepower and torque, but also performance targets. And the Z06 with the Z07 package is faster than the ZR1, which is pretty amazing to think about, just in terms of what that means for the Z06 as they sell it next year, and what that means for the next ZR1, or whatever that is. I mean, you look at the performance capabilities, which we'll get into in a bit on this car, and it's crazy to think that there could be something faster, because this car is absolutely ridiculous. So tons of power and a very broad power band. And that's interesting because when you pair it to this new automatic, which is available in the Corvette, it's interesting. So two transmission options for the Z06, 7-speed manual, 8-speed automatic. 7-speed manual is the transmission we know and love. For this year, for 2015, Chevy says they've updated the rev matching feature, so it's even faster. They've managed to change some programming and make some wiring, so when you clutch in and go down a gear, the engine speed goes to the right RPM even faster than it did last year. And in their own testing, in Chevy's own testing, they haven't been able to beat it. A couple of guys said they could beat it on the previous system. Now the Chevy guys with the manual cannot beat the rev matching system, and you could still turn it off if you want to. I think the car actually keys up with the system off, so if you turn it on, I love it. I love the automatic rev matching. It's really, really cool. It takes the when you're doing some big high-speed corner entry stuff, it takes a lot of worry off the plate that you have to think about when you're doing some big high-speed corner entry stuff. The rev matching is a very, very welcome feature to extreme performance driving. The 8-speed automatic, though, is a really, really cool transmission, and this thing's going to be available across all Corvettes. 8 forward gears, as I mentioned, and that allows you to have a very close ratio box and also have some really tall gears for freeway cruising. I mean, I forget what the final overdrive is in this thing, but it's revs at 60, which is a test that we do at Motor Trend. It was like an absurdly low, like top gear revs at 60 were like 1200 RPM or something. So this engine's barely turning at freeway speed in 8th gear. So that's going to help fuel economy, but this transmission also makes the car faster ultimately. It's a standard automatic too. The Chevy team considered a dual clutch, but they couldn't find one from any supplier that would fit in the car, meet the weight targets, and withstand the power that this LT4 generates. And it generates a ton of power, as we just saw. So GM made its own 8-speed, and it does all that. And it's pretty compact. I have another picture in here of it on a stand, and you'll be surprised at how small this transmission actually is. And it works really well on track. The 8-speed automatic is the fastest way to get a Z06 because it, you can shift a manual as fast as you want. You will not beat the shift times out of this thing at all. It's so fast, and it's also going to shift more often than you can in a manual. So with a big, high power, high torque engine like you have here in this LT4, you can be lazy with gear changes on road course. If there's a particularly tricky section of turns, you can short shift and leave it in a higher gear and just sort of get it through with the awesome power on tap. With this automatic in its most aggressive setting in the sportiest drive modes, it's shifting predictively, and it does a really good job at it. It'll put you in gears you normally wouldn't be in if you were driving a manual. There's a part at Road Atlanta, I think it's turn 3, where if you drive it fast, like really, really fast, you put 2 wheels in the air. And you don't want to take a hand off the wheel when you have 2 wheels in the air. But ideally, to get through this corner, you want to downshift as you land, right? That's the fastest way to get out of there. Most of the time, if you're in a manual, you have the power, you have the torque, you say, yeah, that 10th or that 100th is not worth it because, it's going to require a shift while two wheels are in the air. The automatic makes the shift, and it enables you to be in the lower gear as you come out of that corner and gets you that 10th or that 100th or whatever the difference is between shifting and not shifting. GM's internal testing, I believe it was at Milford Road Course, Chevy's road course out in Michigan. They found that the automatic spins the engine on average 400 RPM higher per lap than the manual. Now that means that's a lot, and what that means is you're getting more power out of the engine. You're translating more power out of the engine to the rear wheels and being faster because you're carrying more revs. And as you can see from the previous picture, more revs means more power. So it's the fastest way to do it. Both transmissions are totally satisfying too. That's the really weird thing. The manual is still really fun to rip an upshift on. There's someone at Chevy who knows how to make a satisfying shift. And a satisfying shift is a very important thing in a sports car. If you can make that upshift, and that upshift feels good, it's not the speed, it's not the data, but it's the sensation you get after the upshift. Just the feel of moving the lever, the sound, the interface between the clutch gas and the shifter. There's somebody at Chevy who gets that, and it's true for the Z28, and it's definitely true for the Z06 and standard Corvette, because banging upshifts in that thing is really, really fun. Although with the 7-speed box, the manual, it is frustrating. This happened to me numerous times on the back straight at Road Atlanta, where I do the 1, 2, 3, 4 to 7 upshift, and that was frustrating. You have to kind of relearn where to apply pressure on the shifter in order to not miss gears. It's just mildly frustrating, and you kind of get used to it. I started getting used to it because, you know, I don't drive a Corvette every day, but I imagine people who do drive Corvettes every day would get used to it. Now, the automatic is satisfying too, not because you're actually touching anything. You aren't. You know, when you're in the most aggressive shift mode, you don't need to shift by yourself. The shift logic is such that you're always in the right gear. And the upshifts, though, are still really satisfying because when you have your foot to the throttle and the car makes an upshift, the engine keeps the throttle open and just cuts timing basically, and then restarts it, which also produces this awesome bark through the exhaust. I mean, this thing sounds ferocious on upshifts. It's just bam, bam. It sounds really cool. And what else? It's interesting too because when the car's cornering, shifts will be smooth, and when the car's straight, they'll actually kick the shifts will actually kick the car. You'll actually feel an increase in G, and I've always hated that, right? I've harped on Lamborghini quite a bit for doing that, and when I talked to Taj about it, he said, "Oh yeah, that pulse, that kick, actually makes the car faster. It's transferring some of the kinetic energy to an upward pulse and acceleration. It's a very small amount. I mean, we're probably talking like hundreds, if not thousandths of a second, maybe even less than that. But it is a way to make the car faster. I still wish it wasn't there because I don't really like hard shifts like that. I don't shift like that in manuals unless I'm chasing acceleration times. I like smooth shifts. Call me granddad, whatever. Anyway, the automatic rules. You can shift it yourself if you want, but again, leaving it in automatic, its logic is great. And when you're driving a car of this speed and of this kind of capability, it's actually really nice to let the transmission do the shifting by itself because unless you're a racing car driver, I'm not a racing car driver. I'm okay, but I'm not a racing car driver. The level of performance this car gives to you, when you start really getting into that, you don't want to think about shifting. You want to make sure you're keeping the car on the apexes you're aiming at and how much throttle load to apply. That's enough work to consider when you're really pushing this thing. And I don't mean like, you know, driving on the street. I mean really pushing it. There's a lot of performance on the table here, and when you start getting to it, you really want to focus on that. You don't want to think about shifting, and that's what this automatic is nice for. The manual is still really good too. I don't envy the people who have to decide between automatic and manual because both are great, and I don't look down on any option in this car because I could see having either. They're both that good. Here is the LT4. Now, this is a couple cool things. It shares the displacement of the LT1, of course, and it's built on basically the same foundation. It's an all-aluminum engine with a, what's it called, a Eaton TVS Roots type blower on the top, or supercharger blower, whatever you want to call it. And as you can tell from the power graph, it's a hell of an engine. It's compact, it's fuel efficient, and it makes a ton of power. More power and torque, of course, than the ZR1's engine, and it's lighter too, in part because it's a smaller supercharger than the one the ZR1 had. Now, just cool things about this engine: it's a pushrod engine. It's got a cam on the block. Doesn't have fancy dual overhead cams or anything like that, but it does have direct injection. It does have a variable valve timing, and it does have cylinder deactivation. Yep. Even in the Z06, you get cylinder deactivation. So when you're cruising along in 8th gear if you're in the auto, or 7th gear if you're in the manual, you'll actually see it go into V4 mode. If you're just, very light on the throttle. Once you start trying to accelerate, it instantly comes out of V4 mode. But yeah, this thing will run on 4 cylinders instead of 8, which is pretty crazy to think about in your 650 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque sports car. And that's really how absurd cars are getting. I mean, this is a car that, in our testing pulled 1.16 G. We'll talk about that later. Average. And it pulled that G average. But it also can run in V4 mode. I mean, like, cars are silly these days. So this is from the top. And we're actually going to disassemble the supercharger here through the magic of changing pictures. Watch this. 1, 2, 3. Isn't that neat? I thought that was cool. I really appreciate the photographer who took the time to do that. So it's a TVS root style blower. In fact, there's a better cutaway here of all the parts in action. It makes less boost it's smaller and lighter than the unit on from the ZR1, but as you can see, this thing makes more power and torque. Now, crucially though, it being smaller means this engine, this LT4, is about an inch taller than the LT1, which is pretty incredible. I've gone over the advantages of pushrod engines. You know, you could give them flack for not having dual overhead cams or anything like that. And plenty of people do. I used to be in that camp myself. But when you realize the advantage to pushrod, the compactness that you get out of it is really worth it. So without, let's go back. You know, these heads are tiny because they don't have cams on them or anything. If you had dual overhead cams, these heads would be massive. Look at a 5-liter Coyote in a Mustang, and you see how big that engine is, or any Japanese or German V8. They're tall engines because they have a ton of valve train happening up there. With just a cam and block and push rods, you don't need all that stuff. That means a smaller, more compact engine, a lower center of gravity, and there's tons of downstream benefits because of that, which we can get into when we talk about the body. I've become a convert to pushrod engines, and maybe it's because I put one in a 240SX. Maybe because they actually work. They seem to work pretty well as far as I can see. Anyway, the supercharger. How much boost does that thing make? 9.5 psi, or 9.4 psi, around there. So again, lower than the ZR1, but again, doesn't matter. Look at the power and torque. I'd be interested to see, you know, what kind of gains you get out of this car if you put like a twin screw on it or something. Of course, anybody who buys this car and sees the need to get 1,000 horsepower out of it, you got to be crazy, because this thing is so fast. That I don't see, personally, I see no need to actually make it any faster. I mean, with this thing on drag radials would probably be in the 10s. Just completely stock car, radials on it, you're probably in the 10s. No problem. I mean, it's a silly car. So if you want to go faster, you probably got tons of headroom there, but I don't see the need. It's also got a pretty high compression too. We're at 10:1, and that's in part because it's a DI engine. There's the cam. Look at that prettiness. And here's the cutaway. I just love these cutaways. I'm so glad that people still do them because they are so neat to see. All little doodads and art and stuff. There's got to be one guy who does these things. Yeah, David Kimball. They're still really neat to see. Oil pan. Dry sump oil pan. And that helps, you know, because at the lateral loads this car can generate, you need to make sure there's oil flowing around this thing because we're talking about some pretty serious lateral load. So the dry sump oil pan, which is great. Here's the transmission. Here's the 8-speed, and it's tiny, as you can see. Like, it's really small, and that's really cool. This thing weighs, I think it was like 8 pounds more than the manual, which is great. You know, it's a weird thing when the manual and the automatic weigh the same. Tad said that the manual's heavy because it's got a real heavy clutch and flywheel. You know, you got a ton of power on there, and you gotta make sure you don't shred it. So it's effectively no difference in terms of weight between the automatic and the manual. Chevy's claiming all their performance data, their straight line performance data and stuff, with the automatic, and they say 2.95 seconds to 60 with the automatic. Of course, that's 3 seconds in the world where we round up. The testing that we did with the manual, I believe those numbers. What do we do? With the manual, we did 11.3 at 126.2. That's really fast. Didn't use launch control. Launch control slightly slower, but way more consistent. It's frustrating getting the launch out of this thing right on an unprepped surface. Motor Trend tests on an unprepped surface. If you had a prepped surface, you know, some VHT down, and again some tires that were meant for drag racing, you'd be in the 10s, no problem. I mean, probably low 10s looking at the trap speed in the ET there. Or the trap speed in the ET. That's a 10th faster than the ZR1, and this is a Z06, and it's a 10th faster than the ZR1, the last ZR1 we tested. That's cars are silly. Cars are silly these days. Here's a very bad cell phone photo of a cutaway of the LC4. My iPhone is getting worse and worse and worse. And here's a cutaway of the supercharger. You can see the what are they called? The you know what I mean. Exhaust manifolds. And now, interesting thing is, I asked Taj if they had considered turbos, and he actually said, yeah, they did. But the problem is, in order to fit the turbo in the right spot, you basically want it, you know, right here where the exhaust manifold is. You want it as close to the engine as possible. That's why I see a lot of the Germans put the turbos in the V's. They want that quick light off. There's actually a structural component that goes really close back there. It connects the transmission tunnel, not the trans tunnel, the drive shaft tunnel essentially, because it's a transaxle car. It connects the tunnel to the frame and adds rigidity to the chassis, and that would interfere with the turbo, because basically those two parts would want to occupy the same space, and that doesn't work unless they modified that link or put the turbo further downstream, which is not ideal either, because that makes engine responsiveness worse. So they couldn't do it for that reason. And I asked him why not do it in the V, and he said because their hood line, their hood height, is very important. They want a low hood for better visibility and a lower center of gravity and lower car overall. And there's a lot of safety concerns, especially in Europe with pedestrian safety stuff. There's got to be a certain amount of deflection and rebound the hood will give a pedestrian if they should, fall into it and bounce their head off of it. And this all means for higher height in the hood, and they really want to avoid that to keep the car at their center of gravity targets. Just an interesting aside, they actually considered it and didn't make it work. It sounds to me that those mid-engine Corvette rumors are probably more true than not, because if you want to put turbos in the engine, you basically have to reconfigure the entire thing or move the engine to the back and build the car around the engine, and that sounds like a real possibility. So these are the tires. There are two tires you get on the Z06. One is a Michelin Pilot Super Sport, and one is the Pilot Sport Cup 2. And guess which one we're looking at? If you said Pilot Sport Cup 2, you were right. There's little cute tread marks on the side here. This is a very, very sticky tire. These ones are used. These are after I did our figure 8 test in it. And man, there's a lot of grip in this car. Oh man. So the combined section width, if you were to just put every tire next to each other and measure it, be 4.1 feet. It's that's a lot of tire on the pavement there. The car, compared to the standard Corvette, front tires are 1.5 inches wider. The rear tires are 2 inches wider. The fender extensions on the front are 2.2 inches, and on the rear are 3.2 inches. So this thing has some width to it, and it's some real serious width. The figure 8 time that we got, that I got, 22.5 seconds, right? So to put that in context, like the SRT Viper Track edition did a 22.8, the Porsche 918 did a 22.2. So this is the Z06, the one that we tested, is the fastest non-918 production car we've ever ran around the figure 8. And that took some effort. We had a manual, but it was easy because the length of the track and the speeds that it hit meant you didn't have to shift at all. Man, this car generates some grip. It was 1.16 G average laterally, which is the highest G average we've ever recorded from a production car, even including the 918. And that is some stick. I actually, while holding myself onto the steering wheel, actually got a minor strain in my left arm from giving correction and having to hold myself into the place of the seat. Man, it's a fast car. After driving it, there's an optional bucket seat, and that's what we had in this car. It's like carbon fiber, and good bolsters and all that. And it's a good bucket seat for a street car. It's a very good bucket seat for a street car. But when Randy drove it, he got out and said, "This car's not, doing street car things." There are some high lateral loads, and if I owned this car and I was planning on doing some track work, I'd have to put a harness in, just because like the lateral loads are such that you need extra support to stick yourself in place. I really hate to harp on Corvette seats because that's such a tired thing, but it's not a bad thing anymore. It's a good thing that the seats aren't up to snuff, because they're good buckets. The car's lateral limits are just higher than any street car that you can think of. It's absolutely insane what this car can do. Man. So going more towards the back, here's the exhaust system, of course, and this car has that wonderful thing where at the right throttle load, at the right RPM, there's valves and flaps that open and give you just this deep, ridiculous V8 roar. The cool thing is, if you go into the infotainment system, you can actually change the volume of the exhaust. There's like 4 settings. There's street, sport, track, and stealth. And so the first thing I did when I got in the car is like track, put it on track, get on the loudest, I want the loudest possible exhaust I can possibly get. Set it on, drove it around town for a bit, and then I realized this is too loud because it drones on the freeway. It's like an aftermarket exhaust system on your car. So I put it back in street because it was really loud, and the sound it does give you when the flaps open is enough to make it okay. Stealth is interesting because it makes the car just like silent. It's bizarre. And then up here we have the E-Diff. This car has the E-Diff like the new Corvette or the Stingray Corvette does, and it's a wonderful driver's tools. When you have an actual computer controlled diff and it's well sorted, it really makes a case for itself. This thing works fantastically well in all the drive modes it has available, because it's going to go to full open to full lock depending on what you need. Really interesting things that we talked about back when we drove the last Stingray, because this thing's functionally the same as the last Stingray. When you're getting into like a power slide, when you get to a drift and you come out of it the wrong way, sometimes you can get this like tank slap behavior. You'll see it on people power sliding, and sometimes those wreck videos, you'll see somebody coming out of a slide correcting, and the car just sort of wiggles back and forth as it straightens out, or it gets worse and they spin out the other direction. The diff actively prevents this. When you come out of a slide and it senses that that's going to happen, it'll actually spike torque to the other wheel to counteract that force and help you come out of the power slide straight. And it's totally imperceptible. Like, it's totally imperceptible to a person like me. It might be less imperceptible to a race car driver, but to me, I come out of a power slide in that car and it tracks out straight, and it's beautiful and everything's great. The chassis balance too is tied into that, and this thing is fairly neutral, I gotta say, especially on the figure 8. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of understeer, and you only provoke big oversteer with throttle. It's a pretty neutral chassis, and at the speeds this thing can reach, that's a thing. I think I mentioned that there's a torque tube. It's a transaxle car, so there's a torque tube, and this is carbon fiber. There's actually quite a bit of real carbon fiber on this car, and it's not like advertised as much as some other cars advertise carbon fiber. I mean, sure, you can get the dash and all carbon, and you get carbon on the seats, and carbon on the aero kit and all that stuff. But it's cool to see that kind of technology on a Corvette, and it's done in a really non-flashy way, which is pretty cool too. So the drivetrain is ridiculous, and I could just look at these tires. These are silly. This is not tread. This is not the tread you would use for driving around town. You can, but if you live in rainy environments, well, why would you drive a Z06 in the rain anyway? The standard tire, the what's it called? The Pilot Super Sport, Mission Pilot Super Sport, is much better. Pilot Super Sport's a great tire. This is just like that extra crazy person tire right here, and it's real crazy. Am I missing anything on drivetrain? Oh, I never talked about Randy's laps. Randy ended up running on his first lap a 130.17, second lap a 130.21, third lap 130.67, and it fell off after that. His first lap was the fastest, and that's a real fast lap time. 130.17 at Road Atlanta. That's real fast. I don't know if I didn't ever found any actual like track lap time comparisons for Road Atlanta, but from what I saw in a few forums, 130.17 is real fast for a production car. Seriously fast. And there's more in the car too. Randy came out and he said there's more in the car. He knows there's more in the car. He just more time. You need more time in a car like this to be able to eke out those extra couple tenths, which are there. He just, on your first lap on the car, you're not going for the absolute limit. You're kind of learning things. But the problem is we'll talk about later, is heat. We were on actually we talk about it now. This was an 85-degree day in Atlanta. It was very humid. And every lap, Randy was actually getting more aggressive in the corners, but we saw power decreasing on each lap. And by his fourth lap or his fifth lap, he actually got an overheat warning, and had to put it in neutral to slow down and cool it off. And unfortunately, we didn't have any time for him to go out again because it had rained all morning and our production was way behind in order to get all the shots and photos we needed for video and for the magazine and for the website. We didn't have any time to send him out again, which is a real bummer. He set those lap times, by the way, in a Z06 package car with the full aero kit installed, and automatic. And man, that's a lot of car. It's a lot of car. So what is the Z07 package? Z07 package is the the crazy person track package. It adds big carbon ceramic brakes. Carbon ceramic brakes are, I have them written down here. Where did they go? That was on the next page. Of course it's on the next page. Yes. So 15.5-inch rotors front, 15.3-inch rotors rear, 6-piston calipers front, 4-piston calipers rear. It's actually 6-piston calipers front, 4-piston calipers rear on the standard car too. It's just much larger rotors. They're probably different package caliper setup too. I just forget. All Brembo, and the brakes are lighter as well. The standard setup is pretty robust too. 14.6-inch front, 14.4-inch rear, and it's a good braking setup. Z07 also gets you the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s and the full-on aero kit. The aero kit's really interesting. We're actually looking at the most aggressive aero kit right now. There's 3 stages. The first stage is the standard Z06. You just go standard Z06, no options whatsoever. That's one. The second option is actually the base for the third option. The second option adds a little spoiler, or a little chin spoiler here. This is the third one, so it's not it's not accurate. These side skirts here, and then a spoiler here, and then the third stage bolts onto that. So you get these flicks, I guess, these end plates on here, and then you also get a spoiler on the back that's adjustable too, manually adjustable. And Chevy says it makes more downforce than any car. With stage 3, it makes more downforce than any car they've tested. And they've tested. When I asked Taj what they have tested, he said, "Well, we haven't done a 918." So they've tested McLaren 12C, they've tested 911 Turbo, they've tested all those cars, and this thing makes more downforce than all of them. And what's interesting is this car does it without active aero. Like there's no moving wings or no electronic adjustment. It's all fixed stuff, and that's really cool. Now the rear spoiler, I don't know if I can find a picture of it on the stage 3 car. Maybe this guy. Yeah, you can kind of see here. Yeah, this is a stage 3 spoiler. So the second stage is this part on either side, and the third stage is this part in the center. The second stage, this part isn't here, so there's this little divot in the center. And then the third stage adds this section on the rear here. And these are the settings. There's a high downforce and a low downforce mode and a middle setting. And you unscrew those 4, shift it up, screw it back in. And that's how that works. It's very similar to C28. And Taj said if you're hardcore enough, if those track guys are hardcore enough, they've purposely left some meat on the spoiler for you to drill your own holes if you want a super high downforce mode. It's really cool how that all comes together. This part is transparent or translucent. I forget which is which. So you can have some rear visibility when you're looking through your rear mirror. I thought it would be really cool to have the Jake skull embossed on this section too. And I was like, why did you guys do that? And they're like, oh, we didn't think about that. I'm like, do it! have the C7R Jake skull embossed on the back here. But for whatever reason they didn't. Yeah. This is a very purposeful looking car, doesn't it? So this is probably a good time to talk about stuff that isn't the engine and driveline. The Z06 is all aluminum, like the Stingray, and one of the main things behind developing this car is they wanted to do it with an automatic, and they wanted to do it with roofless construction. All Corvettes are Targas. You can pop off the roof of all of them, and that includes the Z06. Not only that, but you get the Z06 as a convertible. Before you wince and go like, why? There's no performance difference between the convertible and the coupe, per Chevy's claim. The stronger chassis, which is heavier as a result, this aluminum chassis is heavier than the last Corvette. Actually, the stronger Corvette as a whole, this new stronger Corvette is heavier than the last Corvette. The Z06 we tested was 3,500 pounds, and the last Z01 we tested was around 3,300 pounds. So there's a 200-pound difference thereabouts between Z01 to Z06. And that's pretty similar in terms of feature content and all that, but 200 pounds overall. But that allows you to take the roof off. The chassis itself is stiffer than the last Corvette, and this roofless construction was pretty important to the Corvette team because it basically opens up, the roofless construction and the automatic were very important to the Corvette team because it opens up the amount of people who can buy the cars. There's a lot of people, older guys who, let's face it, have some knee problems, and why shouldn't they be able to drive a car? You know, and there are Corvette owners who want to take the most badass, high content car and have a convertible and go to their car meets with it. And that's what, you know, the Z07 convertible with a third stage aero would be ultimately, is this guy right here. You know, there are people who want to do that. And who are we to say, you know, that's wrong or that's bad? This is probably what I'd have. Actually, I might have the Z51. This thing's so much car. So much car. But it's nice to be able to take the roof off. One of the reasons I like the Porsche 918 so much more than the McLaren and the Ferrari is that you can take the roof off. I like cars without roofs. It's reminds me of being back on a motorcycle. It's just something about that is really nice, and it's really cool to do that in the Corvette. And once you take it off, you can put it right underneath the hatch, which is really neat. Corvette's kind of a bizarrely usable car because of that hatch space. And one thing I didn't mention is the aero kit. If you get the Z07 package, or if you get the Stage 3 aero kit, you know, the Z07 package comes with the Stage 3, but you could get Stage 3 independently of that too. That stuff comes effectively in the trunk. So the Stage 2 parts are on the car, and then either the dealership, or I guess you could do it at your house if you wanted to, bolts on the Stage 3 aero. So, and you could take it off too if you want. You don't have to drive around with it on. It's totally removable and installable should you decide to. All right, what else? You know, visually, there's not a lot of differences between Z06 and standard Corvette. I keep wanting to call it Z51 because Z51 is the one you want to get. The vent on the hood is bigger on the Z06 because there's a lot of heat coming through this engine, as we mentioned with the overheating that we saw. Maybe I should talk a bit more about that. So, you know, we were kind of bummed to see that overheat happen. It was a warm day, and it was at the pace of a racing driver, not, you know, me or not, you know, your average Joe. And I'm going to wonder how sensitive these things are to heat, ultimately, as more people start driving them. When we did acceleration runs, we saw the temperature climb, and we saw trap speed go down over the course of 10 runs or so. So, you know, heat's going to be an issue on these cars. Chevy doesn't currently have plans to do any sort of cooling upgrade to them. They're not going to offer a track cooling kit, which I think is kind of disappointing, especially when you look into the performance of the brakes and the performance of the aero and all that kind of stuff. But it's one of those things where, like, how far do you push that? Because honestly, this thing's so capable that I'd wager most drivers of this car aren't going to be able to take it to that limit where it's going to overheat on them in 4 laps. You know, really good drivers, there will be a portion of people who will, and they'll experience that on tracks with long straights. I think the Road Atlanta straight is like 14 seconds long or something like that. It's a long straight, and it, you know, Randy's you know, VMAX was in the 150 mile an hour range, and you don't see that on a lot of tracks, but some tracks you do. So when these cars start getting into the hands of consumers, it'll be real interesting to see how the engine holds up to heat. I'll be keeping a close eye on that just for my own personal curiosity. Still, I don't know if it's that big of a deal. I imagine it will be to a few people. But anyway, getting aside, airflow. There's a lot of air going over these cars at 50 miles an hour, as you can might imagine. On the front, this is, as you can see, it's different than the standard Corvette. There's inlet ducts. There's actually brake cooling ducts. This is bigger to help, you know, cooler charge get into the you know, the air induction system, the radiator, the cooling system, all that stuff. You've got these vents here, which I go into more in more detail on other pictures. And then you have more vents here. And this is all sending airflow to the brakes, sending airflow to the diff, sending airflow to the trans. It's just cool stuff down. What's interesting is the race car does away with these guys entirely. It just has little stickers on there because they didn't want to disturb the airflow to their spoiler, and the street car guys didn't have to worry about that so much. I included this picture because, damn, this thing looks good in gray. The one we drove was bright yellow, and it got a lot of attention. And I'm just thinking, man, I kind of want one of these in black or gray, and this thing looks damn good in gray, doesn't it? Pretty imposing car overall. One of these things barreling down on you is making a ton of noise, and man, it's a crazy looking car. So this is the car we had to test. So Randy drove a Stage 3 Aero car, Z07 package, automatic. The one we tested was a Stage 2 Aero Z07 package, manual. Now that works because you can just take the Stage 3 components off. Now if you're going to run drag strip stuff, you take the Stage 3 stuff off because it's actually going to slow you down. Interestingly, Chevy said that when they had the Stage 3 components on, they ran a 200-foot skid pad, 200-foot diameter skid pad, and that was great. They had their time from that. And then when they did a 300-foot skid pad, they actually saw an improvement between Stage 3 and Stage 2 Aero. They actually saw downforce helping the car out on a 300-foot skid pad. Speeds are up quite a bit on a 300-foot skid pad, but maybe 50, 60 miles an hour, I think, I want to say. Maybe a little bit slower. But they actually saw an improvement from Stage 3 Aero on a 300-foot skid pad, which is crazy. I mean, there's a lot of air being pushed onto that car if that's the case. But anyway, we had a Stage 2 car, and man, it was fun. Here it is. Yeah, you can see that the end plates are a lot smaller on this guy versus the Stage 3. And we drove around Atlanta with this thing, and I keep saying cars are getting silly because the performance potential in this car is just awesome. I mean, in the truest sense of the definition of awesome. And it's when you drive this car real hard around a road course, real fast, you get out of it just going like, man, that's serious. It's not like a laugh out loud kind of car like some slower cars might be, like relatively slow, like the M4. You can laugh out loud while pushing the M4 hard. You can laugh out loud while power sliding those cars around. This thing at limit performance takes all of your attention. And but what's bizarre is that when you drive it on the street, it's like a normal Corvette. Just absolutely normal. I mean, it doesn't scrape on anything. The ride isn't appreciably stiffer. It's totally normal, which is just bizarre. It just feels like a normal Corvette. And in fact, when you drive it hard, if you've ever driven a Z51 Corvette, it's very much like that. It just feels like you're turning the dial up every time you push it harder and harder and harder and harder, and you find there's just limitless headroom on that dial, and you can just keep cranking it until you run out of skill. And that's ultimately what will happen because this thing has so much capability in it. It's just nuts. Yeah, man. There it is at Road Atlanta. So this section, it goes the direction of the car's facing. And if you've ever done this in Gran Turismo or Forza Motorsport, you know this section well. This section actually in the car is hell on your stomach because looking at Randy's laps, there were, in the span of about 14 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, there were 6 alternating 1G plus moments. From left to right to left to right to left to right to left to right. That's a G. So a G is essentially if you were to jump out of a plane, you fall to Earth at a G. That's the Earth is pulling you to it at a G. And imagine doing that back and forth 6 times in the span of 14 seconds. Over that, because this thing's doing over a G. Imagine doing that 6 times, and you get an idea of what we mean when we talk about harnesses. It's not because the seats are bad. It's because you're doing a lot of G. And this car it's a G generator. I mean, like I wrote in the story, around the figure eight, it felt like driving a tilt-a-whirl, because it's just you turn in and go off to the side. It's ridiculous. And then here you can see Stage 2 without the extra wicker bill on the back, and it just has that opening, which is nice. They're the carbon ceramics and the Pilot Sport Cup 2s. They're massive brakes, as you can see, and they work really well. We recorded the best 0 to 60, or 60 to 0. I'm sorry, best 60 to 0 we recorded was 91 feet. Which is absurd, but as absurdly low as the last ZR1. But what was really cool, though, is that every stop I did from 60 to 0 was under 100 feet. So it's not just that one great stop, it's a consistent performance. I think I did like 5 or 6 stops just to get it up to 10th and then just keep watching it, but every single stop was under 100 feet. And it's that consistency which makes this thing crazy. So here are those ducts on the shoulders. And I'll try to explain this as best as I can. So Taj originally pointed at this, and he said that when he first saw these, he was like, "This is not going to work. Look how high this is into the air. That's not going to work." And then Aerodynamics showed him wrong. So this effectively, as he explained it to me, this effectively combines the effects of ram air and a NACA duct to feed. I think this one's feeding the diff, maybe feeding the trans. One feeds the diff, one feeds the trans, depending on the side. The bottom is I forget which is which. I should know that, but again, I'm not an engineer. But this is combining the effects of one end of a NACA duct and one end of a ram air effect to get the most airflow into that thing as possible. And the shape of that, this interesting shape here, and how it comes up, enables them to capture more air than if this were flat. I suggested to Taj casually that he should call it a half duct, and he didn't find that nearly as amusing or clever as I did, which is a bummer. Here are the bucket seats, and this is a terrible photo of them, and I think this is the only one I took. I'm a really bad photographer. You know, competition. That's what it says, and that's what it means, which is cool. This is the enlarged vents, or the enlarged vent over the hood. Now, the funny thing is when Taj was walking around the car, he walks up with this hood, he literally punched it, because he was explaining why the body looks the way it does and what they have to do to meet European pedestrian crash safety targets. And one of the things they have to do is make a soft hood, effectively. Now, I don't advocate going to Z06s and punching them in the hood. Don't do that. That's not smart. But if you're the chief engineer of the car, yes, you can punch the hood of the car you've created. The hood has to be soft if you bounce your head off of it. And if these vents here, if you poke them, don't do it on people's cars, but if you poke them, they'll actually bend out of the way. And they have to have that softness to prevent, you know, certain types of injuries from pedestrians who keep jumping on the front end of Corvettes, which is really interesting. On the front too, the little teeth coming off the front, they're there specifically to meet a part of a pedestrian crash safety test that has to deal with ankle damage or ankle injuries. They're there kind of to step aside the test, and apparently the European regulators aren't happy with it, but that's what everybody's doing. Let's just another aside. There's the induction system into the Corvette, and how they're passing air through the radiator and all that. Here you can see the width. It's a lot of tire on those things, especially on the extensions. And just in case you forget, this is a supercharged car. I mean, sometimes, it's just better to not tell people, but they do anyway. Here are the carbon ceramics on the rear tires. The 4 exhaust pipes, and it's a standard Corvette thing. And there's a lot of fundamental Corvette stuff under this car that isn't changed, and that's kind of what makes it impressive too. Is you know, the center pipes are those the ones that open up? I think they're the ones that open up. Yeah, when you hit the exhaust and make that. So like normally when you're driving around, there's only 2 of these pipes are making noise, and then when you go to the high RPM open exhaust mode, I think it's the center 2 open up and make all that wonderful, terrific noise. Now, the interesting thing while testing it, do I have a picture of the shifter? I have a picture of the 6-speed. Anyway, while doing acceleration runs, you know, I've tested the ZR1 quite a bit, and the thing I remember from the ZR1 was it never felt dangerous, it never felt out of control, but it always kind of told you it was. You always felt it kind of moving around. Excuse me. I remember the first time I got into a ZR1, really got into the power band, it was kind of one of those, whoa, okay moments. And when you're doing an acceleration test with that car, I wanted to shift quick just to get my hand back on the wheel as fast as I could, because I felt like I needed 2 hands on the wheel at all times. And you should always have 2 hands on the wheel. What I found though with this Z06 is the stability of the thing allows you to not freak out or not worry or not even be concerned about how the car is moving around. ZR1s always kind of felt, the ZR1s and Z06s last gen always kind of felt like they were moving around a little bit. They always kind of had this, not on edge, it's not a scary or disconcerting feeling, but it does give you a little bit of concern to have the car always feeling like it's doing this while you're doing an acceleration run or while you're doing a handling run or all that. The Z06 doesn't. The Z06 feels remarkably stable to the point where Randy got out and said, give it another 100 horsepower. It's got the stability to do it. You know, I think that's a crazy thing to say, because this thing doesn't need another 100 horsepower. But while doing acceleration runs, I got that experience because I realized while doing acceleration runs and while doing 11-second quarter miles, I was doing it one hand on the steering wheel, which is bad. That's not something you do. You keep both hands on the wheel at all time. But I realized the stability and was allowing me just to focus on cutting the right launch, hitting the right shifts, making sure that stuff was happening as fast as I could to reach that ET. I wasn't concerned about the vehicle's stability because it just had so much, and I could focus more on just attaining the ridiculous performance that this thing gets. And that's what I think what will make this car faster ultimately in the hands of most people, is that it doesn't feel like it's on edge. Although it has this awesome performance capability, it doesn't feel scary. It feels serious. It doesn't feel scary. Z01 felt serious and scary at certain points, but this thing feels just awesome. And part of that is the electronic aids at your control. Some of these photos are from the standard Corvette. The interior ones are because I couldn't find any of the Z06, and I just didn't take any while we were testing it because we're running around like madmen. But all the stability control and EDIF settings and driver mode stuff carries over from the standard Corvette. You have drive modes. You have wet, street, sport, and track. Eco, street, sport, track. Right, that's what it is. So Eco is going to let you do the V4 mode. Eco is going to adjust the throttle map, the air control, air conditioning, all that stuff to be more economical. So if you want to get that last mile per gallon out of your Z06, you can. Street, sport, track, that's going to ramp up, throttle behavior, steering behavior, the magnetic shocks, how those behave. Yes, this thing has magnetic shocks, magnetic fluid-filled shocks, excuse me. It's going to affect the differential, how that behaves as well. If the automatic, it's going to affect the way the transmission shifts, how long it's going to hold revs for. So as you keep ramping up with those modes, the car gets more and more aggressive. And then the stability control, it has performance traction management, which is just an awesome system, and it's always been an awesome system since the ZR1. It's really bizarre, and it's actually a really cool driver's tool, provided you use it correctly. It has 5 modes, and those 5 modes are separate from the drive modes that I've already talked about. This is like a subsetting beyond that. And what the performance traction management does is it allows you to increase how aggressive you can drive the car, how aggressive the car will allow you to drive it, but still maintain a margin of safety. So the first 2 settings I think are for wet, and the last 3 or 4 like performance and like track and race or something like that. But what it allows you to do is when you're coming around a corner, you can learn how much throttle input you're supposed to give the car, because the car is going to monitor tire spin, yaw rate, lat G, all that stuff, throttle input, and it's going to bias power depending to meet your lateral limit. So if you start spinning a tire, it's going to start slowing, it's going to start cutting engine power, not in a slap your hands, don't do that sort of thing, but in a way that makes you faster. So what I found in the past with this normal Stingray is that I could learn how much throttle load I could give the car on each corner based on the feedback from performance traction management. And you know very clearly when it's cutting throttle to, because you hear a brrrr from the exhaust, and you can feel it. You can feel the car helping you get through that corner safely. It's a really, really, really clever, smart system, and provided you treat it right, it can teach you how to drive the car safely and very, very quickly. You can also learn how to drive it wrong too, because in the most aggressive mode, when you're mid-corner, you can basically go flat on the throttle and lean on the stability control to solve all your problems for you. I mean, people give crap to the GTR about having electronics figure out. The Corvette's performance traction management figures it out for you. This is like the biggest representation of figuring it out for you. So I don't know why people haven't turned on the Corvette for this, but I love the system because I use it as a way to learn how much throttle the tire will take around every turn of a track. And you can use that to your advantage and really rely on that to save you if you get in over your head. And with a car's potential, like the Z06, you can get in over your head real quick. And this thing is a really good driver's tool to do that. Speaking of driver's tool, the video that you watched earlier was from the performance data recorder. And that is a really neat feature. It's basically like a video V-Box or some of those data acquisition, video representation stuff you've seen online. And it combines a front-facing exterior camera and the car's sensors, lateral G, throttle load, brake load, steering input, all that, and records that all on a SD card while you're driving. So when you go to a track day, you can put that thing in and record lap after lap after lap after lap, and look at each lap through the camera individually. And when you get home, you can put them all on your laptop and actually compare lap times. and it incorporates GPS imagery, gives you a top-down view of each lap, basically on top of one another, and you can analyze. You can analyze at home through software Chevy provides what makes the car fast, what makes the car slow, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and how you can press through areas harder. It's really, really, really neat stuff. And the secondary feature, which you've probably heard about by now, is you can enable it if you give the car to a valet to sort of prevent them from trying to, hot shoe your car around, because everything's recorded and everything's logged, so you can just say, hey, I'm watching, even though I'm not around, the car is watching everything you do. It's an amazing, amazing system overall. I mean, this is just sort of the technical depth of a Corvette, and who thought you'd ever hear that sentence, considering, magnetic shocks, EDIF, performance data recorder, performance traction management, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on and on, and Corvettes these days are getting really, really impressive. It's got a digital cluster like the standard Corvette, and you can adjust it. This is a picture from the standard Corvette, but it's effectively the same, and this is adjustable. You can change the way this looks. This is the key up mode, I believe, and it gives you tack, gear position, all that stuff. This is, oops, why did I lose the, that's weird, keys aren't working. This is the eco mode. It's going to tell you how to be economical in your Corvette, and this effectively looks the same for the Z06 as well. And then here's the track mode, which is really neat. The neat thing is you can change, you can set it so, like, I like this one the most. I can make sure that's the one that's always on. So even if I put it in track mode, this is the one I always see. But these are also kind of irrelevant too, because there's a heads-up display or a head-up display on the windshield that's really helpful, because you can make that just say tack and speed, and you can only need to reference that while you're driving fast. You can really just focus in on that and not have to check the dash. More sports cars should have head-up displays, because head-up displays are awesome. They are such a good tool that you can rely on while hustling a car, and I wish more cars had them. The interior isn't that much like the standard, unlike the standard Corvette, and that's what we're looking at here, I believe. No, this is the Z06 convertible interior. Yeah, so I just got confused and thought this was a standard Corvette interior. That just shows you how similar these cars are. Very, the exact same basically with Corvette. This screen here goes up and down. There's a little storage cubby hole behind it. What else? That's not much to report on here. It's all similar. There's the 8-speed. This is also show car stuff. This now says 650 horse, 650 pound-feet. Again, because he just got to brag. Yep, there it is. This is a picture I took from my phone or from my camera, I forget. So when you're in the car, somebody asks you how much horsepower it has, how much torque you have, you point at this. I kind of wish they didn't do this stuff, but that's just my personal preference. I'd probably see if there's a way to pop that off or get it to say something else. But it is pretty cool that you have that power. There's a fuel gauge and your boost gauge. Oh, that's the difference on the dash. It actually has a boost and vacuum gauge over here, and it seems to be fairly accurate as far as I could tell just by glancing on it while driving fast. This looks like a rendering of a Corvette dash. It might actually be real. It's a Stingray dash though, and this is all the same too. Same nav system, all that. I think the graphics have changed, but it's effectively the same. Also, Z06 can have heated and cooled seats. Like, I keep shrugging because, like, it used to be sports cars were like these very narrowly tailored thing that just did that one really fast thing well, and then like driving on the street was what you didn't want to do. But now, like, cars like the Z06 and a couple other out there just give you everything, and without any sort of downside. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let me see if there's anything I missed, because that might do it for the Z06. This is a car you want to spend a lot of time learning, and it offers a lot of time. It offers a lot to learn, which would be really cool. The nice thing, Corvettes, in the past, I've always got the impression that a Corvette is just sort of like a one and done sort of thing. Like, you got in it, yeah, it's fast, yeah, it's not very fun, yeah, it's kind of sketchy, and that's kind of it. I'd rather have a 911. That used to be my mindset. Now I look at a Z51 Corvette because it basically gets a lot of the features that the Z06 has: 8-speed automatic, all that stuff, performance traction management, EDIF, and I think, this is probably the car to have if you're looking for a good sports car for under 100 grand, in terms of the performance it delivers, but also the driving experience. And it's one of the cars you can really, I think you can really learn and grow with as a driver, because using stuff like the performance traction management, you can learn how to push that car hard, and it'll keep allowing you to drive it harder and harder and harder and harder. And once you feel like you've mastered that car's limits, like, you're going to be a good driver. You know, it's a great car to learn with, and the Z06 is just absolutely ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I think this is a nutty car for nutty people, just in terms of performance. I think, you know, if you're going to buy this and drive around town, that's totally fine. That's what you can do. But if you're going to buy this to have the fastest car, that's basically what you'll have. Maybe not at a stoplight drag race, but at a road course, once you start pushing at this thing, you're going to be, man. Make sure I didn't miss anything. The suspension is fundamentally the same as a standard Corvette, stiffer all around. That's why I didn't mention it much, aside from magnetic shocks. I believe the standard Corvette has that too, with Z51. Yeah, that might do it. So anyway, hope you enjoyed. I know it's been a while since the last Let's Geek Out video, but I hope to do more of them soon. And I just like to do them on cars that I've been able to spend a good amount of time with and really understand. So I'll bring more as soon as I can drive more awesome cars and get a lot of time in those cars. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.